Back to the program. Thanks so much for being with us. Joining us now, we do have a special treat. We have State Representative Nate Bell on the line. He is from District 20. Representative Bell, thanks for coming on, sir.
Good to be here. How are you this afternoon, Paul?
I am doing fantastic. So we do a little thing up here called Johnny Cash Friday, and it's always puts me in a good mood to listen to some of the best music ever written. So it's really good.
I'm about to drive home, and Johnny Cash makes good driving music. I find that channel on my Pandora from time to time.
Well, good. Hey, listen, you're from District 20, so if you don't mind telling us up here in Northeast Arkansas, whereabout is that?
Well, I'm almost as far away from you as you can get and still be in Arkansas. I am out on the Oklahoma border, about halfway between Texarkana and Fort Smith. I represent pieces of Sevier County, most of Montgomery County, and most of Polk County.
Okay. Well, I'm thrilled that you could come on with us today, and because, one of the reasons I'm reaching out, and I had Representative Bob Ballinger on yesterday, and I'm trying to work out some other folks, is because up here in Northeast Arkansas, we sent, the voters sent a lot of freshmen down there, and so, and that's a good thing, but considering the historic gains, I just kind of wanted to talk to folks who've been down there, and I didn't know if you could tell us, Representative Bell, what do you think some of the goals are for this big Republican majority? What do you hope to see accomplished?
Well, I certainly never want to speak for other people, but I can tell you personally, my goals are to look at a lot of reform within how our state agencies operate, regulatory reform, and reform in our state contracting process. There's just been a lot of abuse of hiring of consultants and a lot of cronyism, and I'm looking, my focus since I've been here has been to really work on improving transparency in process, and a lot of the, I call it geeky stuff, but it's a lot of the stuff that doesn't make a big splash, but you look back 15, 20 years later and realize that it made a difference. And so that's integrity of process is a lot of what I'll be working on.
Okay. I think that's certainly, we had a lot of candidates up this way that were running on, less regulation, more freedom, just a more equitable tax environment to make it fair on businesses and things like that. And, the state agencies, they play a big part in that, setting these policies and things like that.
Well, following passage of Issue 1, we're certainly in a situation where we have the opportunity to really take some big steps towards major reform and regulation. And I agree. When you go out and talk to businesses around the state, like I try to do, as I look at how do we incentivize job creation. I consistently hear complaints about the regulatory burden, and a significant percentage of it is federal regulation that we have a limited ability to do anything with here at the state. But there's also a significant burden of state regulation. We're board and commission deaf here in our state. We've got in the hundreds, literally, of boards and commissions, and onerous licensures, a lot of continuing ed requirements, and just a lot of things that's basically protectionism for those who are already in business, and it'll certainly be a focus of mine here throughout this next 2 years.
Okay.
Try to roll some of that back.
Also, I guess up here, really all across the state, we had a lot of talk about Obamacare, the private option, the future of it. It certainly wasn't a popular thing with the voters up here, the program being over budget the way it is and things like that. I know in the fiscal session, you had an amendment to attempt to stop the advertising on the PO. So I guess I have two questions. Were you satisfied with that amendment? Because I hear some reports that outside groups still are able to get funding from the government to get grants to still advertise. And that's number one. And number two, what do you think the future of the private option is? Are you going to vote against it if given the opportunity?
Paul, I think that is definitely a two-part question. So let's start with the first half. A lot of folks missed in the language of the amendments that I wrote, and frankly, I think both liberals and conservatives missed it, that my amendments weren't mainly targeted at the private option. They were targeted at Obamacare. And specifically, all of the language included ACA. And why is that important? It's important because there were, depending on who you believe, somewhere between $20 and $25 million in potential advertising grants to advertise to the people of Arkansas about how wonderful Obamacare was. That money would have been spent in this previous election cycle. I'm certain it would have influenced a number of people in the state, and certainly could have led to a shift of people's overall opinions. And it was my goal with those amendments, among other things, to deprive the liberal left of the ability to use taxpayer dollars to promote the program. And yes, I'm very happy with the results. We saw a number of those on November 4th, and hopefully going forward we'll be able to look at significant restructuring of how we responded to Obamacare within the state, and we now have the adequate numbers of Republicans. We now control the governor's office. There's simply no excuse for doing anything other than the most conservative option possible.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly agree with that. So, okay, so that's interesting. I hadn't heard that. So you're saying...
well, I certainly didn't advertise it at the time. I wouldn't have been able to pass it.
Right. So you're saying that some of that, the money that was not able to be used, you're saying it actually it wasn't used when it would have been used to try to help Democrats in this last election cycle. That's what you're saying?
Well, no, sir, I didn't say that. I said it would have been used to improve the public perception of Obamacare, and I'm certain that sure, there would have been some roll-off that would have helped Democrats.
Okay, yeah, all right, good. Okay, the next question. I do appreciate it. We're talking with State Representative Nate Bell. He's very gracious to come on with us. One of the issues, you mentioned issue 1, which I was a huge fan of. I'm excited because I think that empowers the people's representatives.
I believe it was the single most important thing on the ballot, and that even includes all the races. I think the long-term impact on the state of Arkansas, we'll see more improvement of our overall economy and our overall business-friendly environment as a result of issue 1 than we will anything else that we did this year.
Okay. Now, but issue 3, tell me, because that was a huge blow. I mean, we really tried to campaign against that here on the program and let people know, kind of maybe the deceptive nature of that. What are your thoughts on issue 3? Because I do know there was some good ethics ideas in there. So how's that going to affect things moving forward?
Well, I'm going to step back and actually touch on the last part first.
Okay.
The term limits changes that came as a result of that will serve to do a couple of things. First of all, for the last couple decades now, following term limits being implemented in Arkansas, there's been a shift of intellectual knowledge and institutional knowledge to the Senate, and the Senate has had a huge advantage over the House because they have typically have had much more tenure. The goal behind that and the way it's structured is to try to reach some equity between the two bodies. But there's something more important going on there as well within that. And it's something that a lot of conservatives miss. We all, will go around and we'll talk about how important it is that we run government like a business. But there's no business that I'm aware of anywhere on earth that, is a $25 billion business like the state of Arkansas is that would be comfortable having its entire management team have every 2 years have 40% of brand new hires and 30% who will never face another review from their superiors. And because what you literally have in the environment we had prior to passage of issue 3, you had a situation where you had 70% of the body that either didn't care or didn't understand. And I don't believe that's healthy for the public. I think that shows, if you go back and graph state spending prior to the imposition of term limits, you see a pretty steady, over the years, growth rate of fairly close to the rate of inflation. What you see post-term limits is a literally nearly vertical line spike in growth of state spending. Same thing's true with regulation. We have had a situation where the bureaucrats had far more knowledge and would laugh in the face of legislators and literally tell you, "Hey, I'll be here when you're gone."
Okay.
And I think we now have a situation where people can't stay there forever. They won't be able to set up dynasties, but they can be there long enough to actually understand what's going on. Just one additional example: the incoming chair, House Budget Chair, who will step into the role of managing $25 billion in appropriations in January will have less than 2 years experience, or just slightly over 2 years experience serving on the budget committee, because freshmen typically don't get on it. So you've got somebody stepping into a role that literally, under the previous situation, literally is basically a rookie. Mm-hmm. And it has not served the taxpayers well. It has not served the state of Arkansas well. And I believe with having the ability for the House to be there just a little bit longer, okay, and have a little more equity with the Senate, that you'll see much better decision making.
So do you think that the extension of the term limits? I mean, you're making the argument, from what I can hear, that it's going to be a good thing.
I am confident that what we have currently allows someone to be there long enough to understand and to be competent without being there for an eternity.
Okay.
And, I represent a district that was represented by one man for 49 years. Mm-hmm. And I'm literally just about 8 years past that. And so I understand the concerns that come from people of somebody being in office forever. But, ultimately that is our responsibility as voters. And I just want to say that, we're in a situation where we literally have created, I think in many cases inadvertently, but we've created a situation where you have people who, no matter how hard they work and no matter how hard they try, the amount of knowledge and amount of information that they need to have to be able to perform their jobs competently, they ultimately wind up relying on bureaucrats instead of their own personal knowledge. And I don't think that's healthy.
Well, I certainly can see your point, and I do know that you take this concept of being in office too long seriously, because in doing a little research for this interview, I saw where you were out on the record saying, even though when we didn't know the fate of issue 3, you said that you're still not going to seek, I guess, a fourth term in the legislature. You still stand by that?
Absolutely. I have given up roughly $40,000 a year in income since I've been here to be able to do this job. It's hurt my personal businesses dramatically, and in the 4 years I've been here, I'm down about $160,000, and another 2, that'll bump up to well over $200,000 in lost income. I have to, if I want to retire before I'm 80, I'm going to have to get back to making a living. So, yeah. It's time for me to move on and let some fresh blood step in. But there are others who are financially able to stay, and I think it's a credit to the people of the state of Arkansas that they decided to do that. I do want to address some of the other pieces of issue 3. I think personally the ban on corporate contributions, according to Citizens United, is unconstitutional. We'll see how that plays out. I'm confident there'll be a court challenge at some point.
Right.
And we'll see, whether they will allow us as a state to choose to do that.
Okay.
The ban on lobbying spending has already made a radical transformation in how business is done in Little Rock, and we're already seeing the effects of that. That is going to be very positive. I like that. We've already begun to see that, and I think it will have less effect than it would have had maybe in a legislature 7 years ago, because lobbyist spending for legislative entertainment has been on a dramatically declining path for the last 2 cycles. I know in 2011 it dropped over $650,000 compared to 2009 session. And in 2013, it dropped again. I don't remember off the top of my head the exact number, but it's been on a steadily declining path anyway, and a lot of that's lifestyle. A lot of us who have come into the legislature in the last few years, frankly, I'd rather sit in my room and study than I would go out and drink. And as a result of that, I think, just the lifestyle shift that's happened in the people who are here makes a difference in the impact that's there. So.
Yeah, certainly. We're talking with Nate Bell. I appreciate you coming on, sir, State Representative Nate Bell. Real quick, let's talk about committees. You're on the Education Committee and the State Agency and Government Affairs Committee. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and you're number 20 in seniority, and so I know you don't know this for...
I'm number 25, actually.
Number 25, okay. I must have been a misprint on my part. What about committee chairmanships? Do you see yourself as a chair of one of these committees?
Well, ultimately, in the House, that is up to the Speaker of the House. I have asked to chair the State Agencies Committee, and I have not been told no. That is where most of the my interest is. I've served as the chair of the elections subcommittee there for the last term, and have again spent a lot of my adult career working on reform within both our electoral process and our state agency process. So
okay.
it's certainly where my interest is, and certainly where I hope to serve.
Okay. And also, we had this big Republican wave. So on this idea of committees, there is criticism, some criticism, and I know a lot of people are moving towards unity, and I think unity is a good thing. But the concept of maybe the last legislator, selecting the Speaker of the House, in this particular case, Speaker Gillum, having the authority to select committee chairman and in committees and things like that. Some people out there suggesting that, considering the 40 new members in the House, that maybe there was a more equitable way to do this. How do you respond to that criticism?
I would simply say that the people who are saying that almost certainly have never served in the House. You're dealing with a situation where the people who are making those selections need to know the background and know the temperament of the people that they're going to put in those positions. And that's one of the reasons why I've been so vigorously opposed to us changing our system so that freshmen had a vote in the speaker's race. And it's because they don't know who they're voting for. They would literally, in those cases, be voting based on what someone else told them and not on several years' worth of knowledge of working with someone. Mm-hmm. Now, in the environment where maybe there's people who are there a little longer, that my feelings on that might shift when you have a situation where you don't have 40 brand new people walking in the door.
Yeah.
But in a situation where you've got 40 people walking in the door who have no working relationship with anybody, don't have any idea what's going on, they're simply going to be making their vote based on what somebody told them.
But could you understand how the voters who elected their representative to go down there and represent them on all issues, legislation and leadership, can you understand how they might feel a little disenfranchised by that?
I can understand how they would feel that way, but they get to have their say. It's just a little bit delayed because that group of people will select who the next speaker is.
Okay.
And so, it's the impact happens. It's just a slightly delayed impact.
Okay.
And I actually think that's healthy for the process. Once again, 2 years from now, they'll know who they're voting on, and they'll have had 2 years' experience working with and around the person that they're voting on.
If they get reelected, they'll get that opportunity, I guess.
Well, sure, certainly.
Okay. Well, I have one more question for you, and I hate to have to back up. I hate to rewind, but you certainly answered the amendment question with Obamacare. I'm sorry, the private option. But can you just real quick, what do you see maybe the future of the private option here in the state? What's your position on that, Representative Bell?
As you look at, I think you have to step back just a little bit in history. The private option would certainly not have been passed in the form that it was passed in today's environment. We're dealing with while some people call him a conservative, we were dealing with a liberal Democrat governor. We were dealing with a situation where we had only 51 votes in the House and clearly no path to 75 without, a significant number of Democrats voting with us. So while I oppose the private option, I understand why they took the approach they did. I think there was a better way, and had I been in leadership at the time, I wouldn't have taken that path, but I do understand. Having said that, we're not in that environment today, and whatever emerges from the next, 6 months here or so is going to be substantially more conservative than what we currently have. I'm not prepared to say what that needs to be. I made the suggestion last week to several members of leadership that we take 2 or 3 of the real strong antis, 2 or 3 of the real strong fours, tell them, you guys' job is to walk out of a room and tell us what you can agree on, and that'll be our caucus position. And I think, that's but we're going to have to do something along those lines. There's clearly some disagreement. I would say it's much smaller than it has been in the past because all of us understand the environment we're in. And again, we're in a much healthier environment for passing and implementing conservative policy than we were 2 years ago.
Well,
having said that, whatever we come up with still has to get, and this is the key piece here, whatever we come up with, even with 64 Republicans in the House, we still have to have, at a minimum, 11 Democrats voting with us. And so, to pass anything. And, I've told a number of the freshmen, I said, the key thing I want all of you to understand is, don't come in here and tell me what you can block. We control every office in that Capitol. It's our responsibility to govern. So, it's no longer about what we can block. It's about what can we pass.
Well, go ahead.
Well, so anyway, that's it's time to stop being a minority and govern the state of Arkansas and govern it with conservative principles in the lead. But at the same time, that 3/4 vote threshold does require us to have 11 Democrats vote with us.
Well, I certainly understand and agree that the environment does look a lot different than it did. I just want my own personal, my audience. What we really just want the government to shrink. And not grow this time, and so I'm crossing my fingers that will actually happen. And State Representative Nate Bell, I so much appreciate you coming on the program, sir. I'd love to have you on again soon to talk about other issues.
I'd welcome the opportunity, and I do want to say that in the 2014 session, that's the first time in a number of years that a budget was passed that was smaller than the growth rate of inflation, and I hope we continue on that path. Because that's how we ultimately get a smaller government. We continue to pass budgets that grow smaller than the rate of inflation. We'll get there.
Thank you so much, State Representative Nate Bell. You be safe.
All right.
All right, folks. Johnny Cash Friday. Got to go. Back in just a minute.